Welcome back. In this episode, we are going to answer the question, why is there a required minimum distribution by the IRS when you want to start taking money out of an IRA or 401k, or even if you don't, why they require a minimum distribution. The key thing that you're going to learn here is that is poor advice to take RMDs. You don't want Uncle Sam to be your partner for the rest of your life. You'll actually end up with sometimes 50 to 100% more in net spendable retirement income. So let me use some metaphors to help you understand why you do not want to buy into an RMD. So why is there a required minimum distribution? Because the government has been planning on this tax revenue your entire life. Uncle Sam has been your partner. Sometimes people are shocked to find this out, but they actually plan their budgets, their spending budgets every year based upon how many people in America are arriving at retirement, especially age 70, how much money is in there yet to be taxed, IRAs or 401ks. They know what the RMD is based upon their life expectancy. They plan that into their revenue budget. And if you sort of bugger that up and you don't take out what you're supposed to, that really fouls up their projections. And so they want to penalize you 50%. But to simplify it, they just want that money out and they want their share because they've had a permanent tax lien on what has been accumulating in your IRAs and 401ks your entire lifetime. So not only do you put money in, but all the growth on that money, they get a third of or 25% of at the end of the day. So let me use a metaphor of Mount Everest. You know, there's been between 4,000, maybe we'll have 5,000 people here soon that have attempted to climb Mount Everest. Do you know that about 250 people have actually passed away, died in the attempt? Now, here's the question. Do you think the majority of those 250 people who died climbing Mount Everest passed away on the way up the mountain or on the way down the mountain? If you said down the mountain, you're correct. Yeah, it's because they have all this planning on how they're going to ascend and get to the summit. That's retirement, let's say, where we accumulate, we think about, oh, I can't wait till I retire and I have this much money. But we don't think about the descent, the downhill, the back nine in an 18-hole golf game of life. What are we going to do when we descend the mountain? And too many people run out of money because of these rules and restrictions like RMDs. And so when we come down the mountain, that's when most people die. Well, can I just tell you that a lot of people who have money in traditional IRAs or 401ks have their money in a situation where as they come down the mountain of life and slow down, they hunker down, and because of three big dangers, taxes that erode away at it because they want the money out and taxed. And then inflation cuts the purchasing power in half every 7 to 10 years. And then if they have their money in the market volatility. And people outlive their money sometimes in 10 years or less. They're coming down the mountain and they die financially. Well, sometimes people get caught up into, well, if you can save by postponing some more. I mean, when has ever procrastinating further and further down the road come out ahead for you? But in my opinion, that is what is happening with an RMD. And so why do they do this? Why is there such a law? Well, the government wants to start getting the tax revenue, but they don't want to kill the partner that they can have 1/3 of everything you will ever earn the rest of your life. And if you leave it to your spouse, the rest of your spouse's life, and then your non-spousal heirs. Why would they want to destroy that kind of a partnership where all the growth forever they get 1/3 of? But they want to start taking their revenue. So it's really interesting when I say it that way. People come to my events and they get these epiphanies, these ahas, and they're like, oh my heavens, why does CNBC tell us to do that? Well, who's funding CNBC? Government revenuers. So let me give you another little story and an example of what I'm talking about. So I tell you this that will reveal my age. I was in high school in the late 60s. I graduated in 1970. I grew up in Utah. And back then, one of my favorite films came out. It was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Robert Redford and Paul Newman. It was filmed in Utah. And it was about the famous bank robbers in southern Utah, the Hole in the Wall gang. And you probably, if you've heard the story, they were bank robbers, and E.H. Harriman of the Union Pacific Railroad was getting fed up with them robbing his trains and the banks and so forth, but especially the Union Pacific Railroad. So he hired some professional people to track them down. And it got pretty close, and so they took off to South America, to Bolivia. And they went down there because Sundance always had these ideas, but it was Butch that came up with these various ideas that didn't come out like they planned. And so they're down there robbing banks, and pretty soon it gets pretty hot on them again. And so they decide to go straight. And so they hire themselves out to earn an honest living as payroll guards for a mine. And the first day on the job, here are these professional, bandits that are going straight. And they're being led by their leader going up to get the payroll. And so as they ascend to go up to get the payroll, Butch and Sundance are talking to each other. I'll bet the robbers are over here behind the rocks and the cliffs on the right. I'll bet they're behind the bushes on the left. And their boss, their leader, turns around on his donkey and says, morons. I have morons on my team. And they went, what? He says, they don't rob you when you're going up or down the mountain. They don't rob you when you're going up the mountain. Okay, you don't have the money. They rob you when you have the money. And they felt so stupid because they were professional robbers and they didn't even understand that. Sure enough, when they came back with the payroll, they got robbed and they had to do their sharpshooting. And they think, well, that's what happened when we went straight. They were still knocking off and killing people. But see, they rob you when you have the money. And so the government has RMDs because they want you to accumulate the money and they want a permanent tax lien so that when you have the money, they can come and rob you and take their share. And it's when people can afford it the least in retirement. And that's why they have these RMDs to take their share at the time in life when actually you need the money the most and you can afford to pay the taxes the least, but that's the way it operates. And so don't get hurt or die going down the mountain in retirement. You don't want to outlive your money. You want to do a strategic rollout, not a rollover. That's going from the frying pan into the fire if you take your money out of a 401k and put it into an IRA. No, you want to get the money out. Taxes over and done with sooner than later, way faster than an RMD formula. Get the taxes over and done with, maybe in 1 year, maybe 5 years. That's probably the average that I did with my clients. And after 5 years, they were so grateful because the rest of their lives, their income was totally tax-free, because the key is to convert it to something tax-free from now on. And at the end of the day, it will blossom and transfer tax-free in value. And that's done with my favorite vehicle that I call the Laser Fund. So watch this video next if this is intriguing you, so you can see how this all comes together on understanding RMDs and why I think it's the worst advice in the world. And I don't want you to buy into that poor advice.